I always thought that working hard was enough, that if I gave every ounce of myself to my job, if I smiled politely, if I kept my head down and did my work without complaint, people would notice. I thought that integrity and dedication had weight, that they carried their own kind of quiet power. I was wrong. The office was a tall glass building in the center of the city, shiny and imposing, the kind that made people feel small just by walking past it. And inside, I was small. I was Clara, the assistant nobody really saw, the one who organized schedules, answered endless emails, took calls that no one else wanted to, and never, ever spoke up in meetings. I was efficient, I was invisible, and I was perfect for their ignorance. I remember the first day I met Marianne, my boss. She was all smiles and sharp suits, her laughter ringing clear like a bell, the kind of laughter that could cut through the quiet and make you feel immediately inadequate. She had a way of looking at people as if she were already judging them, and I was no exception. "You'll do fine here, Clara," she said, her voice smooth. "Just remember your place." I smiled, nodded, and took it in. I thought, maybe she doesn't mean it like that. Maybe she'll notice my work soon. I was naive. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. I learned every shortcut in the office systems, anticipated every crisis before it happened, stayed late to finish projects nobody else wanted, and always did it with a smile. I was the ghost in the background, making everything run smoothly, silently absorbing every insult that was tossed my way. Marianne had favorites, people who laughed at her jokes, people who dressed like her, people who whispered what she wanted to hear. I wasn't any of those things. I wore simple clothes, kept my hair tied back, and never laughed at her sarcasm. I kept my opinions to myself. I thought that one day my work would speak for me. It didn't. The office gossip started early. It always does. "Did you see Clara messing up the files again?" someone would whisper behind my back. Sometimes it was nothing. Sometimes it was blown out of proportion. Marianne's eyes always caught it, the tiniest flicker of irritation whenever I passed by, and she never missed a chance to remind me of my place. But I kept smiling, because I believed deep down that my hard work had meaning, that patience had power, that the invisible worker eventually becomes indispensable. I was so very, very wrong. I didn't know it yet, but everything was about to fall apart, and not because of me, because of her. I thought the hardest part of my job was the endless work, the constant emails, the late nights. I was wrong. The hardest part was the people. Not just Marianne, but everyone who had learned to treat me as nothing more than a shadow. It started with a simple project, one that could have been anyone's. A client proposal that needed careful attention, tight deadlines, and flawless execution. I stayed late, triple-checking every detail, ensuring that everything was perfect. I even went the extra mile, anticipating questions before they were asked, preparing data sheets nobody would ever glance at. I was proud of the work. I thought Marianne would be proud too. The morning I presented it to her, she barely looked up from her phone. "This is fine," she said. Her tone carried a kind of dismissive weight that made my stomach sink. "But did you check the numbers in Section 3? "Yes," I said. I double-checked everything. "There are no errors." She smirked. "Apparently there are. Look here." She pointed at a tiny figure in the spreadsheet, a number she insisted was wrong, though I had verified it multiple times. "This mistake could cost us the client. Do you understand how serious this is?" I nodded, my heart pounding. Yes, Marianne. By the time the meeting ended, the error, which wasn't mine, had been broadcast to the entire team. People whispered behind me, their eyes dancing with pity or quiet amusement. Marianne didn't defend me. She didn't even look at me as she passed by. Instead, she let the accusation hang in the air, thick and suffocating, and walked away with that smile that could ruin you in seconds. I wanted to speak, to defend myself, but my words stuck in my throat. I was shocked, humiliated, and helpless. And I realized then that nothing I did mattered to her or anyone else. My hard work, my loyalty, my quiet patience, none of it had any weight here. A week later, they fired me. They called it a mutual decision, that my performance was no longer aligned with company expectations. But I knew the truth. I had been a threat. Not because I was ambitious, not because I had said the wrong thing. I had been too competent, too unnoticed, and too calm in the face of their chaos. I had survived their disdain, and that to them was dangerous. As I packed my things, the office felt smaller than ever. The cubicles, the fluorescent lights, the laughter that once seemed harmless. It was all a cage. I walked past Marianne's office one last time. She looked up, feigned sympathy for a moment, and then returned to her phone. I wanted to scream, to cry, to make her see me, see the injustice, but I didn't. I just walked out. I stepped into the elevator down to the street and felt the city swallowing me whole. For days, I wandered. I sat in coffee shops, stared at skyscrapers, and tried to breathe. The world kept moving, indifferent to my pain. And somewhere deep inside, something stirred, a quiet, steady flame. I wouldn't cry forever. I wouldn't beg for recognition. I wouldn't let their arrogance dictate my life. I would disappear. I would learn. I would grow. And one day, when they least expected it, I would return. Not as the assistant they ignored. Not as the girl they humiliated. But as someone they could no longer ignore. I disappeared. Not dramatically, not in a way that screamed revenge or despair. I simply stopped showing up. I erased my presence like a soft sigh in a room that once held noise. No calls, no emails, no explanations. The world kept moving, unaware that one of its invisible pieces had quietly stepped away. At first, the emptiness was suffocating. I had spent so long trying to prove my worth to people who never valued it, that I felt hollow without the structure of their disdain. But in the quiet, I began to see things I had never noticed before. I saw my own reflection clearly, not the one that shrank under Marianne's gaze, but the one I had ignored. The one that had ideas, that could plan, that could achieve more than the walls of that office could ever contain. I read, I studied, I practiced skills I had only dreamed of before. I learned finance, business strategy, communication, all the tools I had once lacked, while I watched others rise, undeserving and loud. I trained myself in patience, in composure, in reading people. Every insult, every belittling comment became a lesson, stored away like currency for the day it would matter. And the world didn't see me. That was perfect. Months passed, then a year, then 2. Friends moved on, colleagues forgot my name. But I didn't forget them. Not Marianne, not the ones who whispered behind my back. I didn't forget the sting of their laughter, the coldness of their smiles. Every memory became fuel, not anger, not hate, but a calm, controlled fire of determination. I worked from the shadows, taking small contracts, building my network, learning the mechanisms of power I had never been allowed to touch. I realized that revenge wasn't about screaming or public humiliation. It wasn't about burning bridges. True revenge was quiet, elegant, and inevitable. It was the art of becoming untouchable while the world thought you were gone. And all the while, I remembered the office. I remembered Marianne, the way she underestimated me, the way she smiled as she crushed me under her indifference. I remembered the whispers, the finger pointing, the casual cruelty. And I promised myself something. When I returned, it wouldn't be with fire or fury. It would be with calm precision. The years of silence taught me something invaluable. Patience is power. Invisibility is strength. And when the time comes, the quietest people often have the sharpest edges. I was no longer Clara, the assistant. I was Clara, the one who had learned, who had grown, who had waited. And soon, very soon, they would see me. I walked into the lobby of the same glass building that had once swallowed me whole, and for the first time in years, I felt no fear, only calm, only clarity. The receptionist barely looked up. I had changed. The quiet girl who had once bent under whispers and disdain was gone. My suit was sharp, my posture confident, my presence undeniable. I was still Clara, but I carried the weight of experience, knowledge, and patience. I had returned not for vengeance in its messy, emotional form. I had returned with quiet, unshakable authority. I remembered Marianne's office, the one with the laughter that cut like glass. I remembered how she had thought she could dismiss me, erase me, and now I would step back into her world, not as the girl she had crushed, but as someone she couldn't ignore. 2 years had done more than change me, and they had given me opportunity. I had partnered with the company's new investor, the quiet one no one paid attention to, the one who valued skill over charm. And through this partnership, I gained influence, resources, and access that Marianne could never have imagined. When I walked into the conference room that day, Marianne barely recognized me. Her eyebrows lifted, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. The team, the same people who had whispered and judged, looked puzzled, curious, unsettled. "Clara," she said, her voice a mixture of surprise and hesitation. I smiled politely. "It's nice to be back." She blinked. "I didn't expect I'm here as a partner for the new project," I interrupted, calm but firm. "I'll be working directly with the CEO on strategy and implementation." Silence. I could feel the shift in the room. The people who had ignored me, laughed at me, and doubted me were suddenly aware. Suddenly I was visible. Suddenly the girl who had been invisible for so long was standing taller than all of them combined. Marianne tried to speak, but her words faltered. She had built her identity on control and dismissal, and now that control had slipped from her fingers. She looked around, searching for support, but the team's eyes were on me. Respect, curiosity, perhaps even a hint of awe. I smiled again, serene and composed. "I believe we have a lot to accomplish together," I said, "and I look forward to working with everyone." Her smirk was gone, her laughter silenced. In its place was uncertainty, a quiet realization that she had underestimated me, that her cruelty had been noted, stored, and transformed into something stronger than resentment, into power. And in that moment, I understood the true art of revenge. It wasn't about yelling, it wasn't about public humiliation, and it wasn't about tearing people down. It was about rising quietly, elegantly, and letting success speak where words once failed. Marianne's eyes met mine briefly, and I saw it: regret, fear, understanding. But I said nothing. I didn't need to. The silence, the calm authority, the unshakable confidence, it said everything for me. I had returned, and this time I was in control. The following weeks were a delicate dance. I moved through the office not with aggression, not with anger, but with precision. Every meeting, every proposal, every decision I touched carried weight. My ideas were implemented. My strategies succeeded. Slowly, inexorably, the balance of power shifted. Marianne tried to regain control. She barked orders, made snide comments, whispered behind closed doors. But no one listened. The team had seen the truth. Competence, dedication, and intelligence could not be ignored. She realized, far too late, that the person she had humiliated had not only survived, but thrived. One afternoon, the CEO called a special meeting. The project I had spearheaded had exceeded all expectations, bringing in contracts Marianne had dreamed of capturing herself. Everyone gathered in the glass-walled conference room, the sunlight reflecting off the city skyline, painting a perfect picture of calm authority. Marianne stood at the head of the table, her usual confidence wavering. She tried to speak, to interject, to claim credit for ideas that were mine. But I had already learned the lesson of words. Results speak louder than noise. I simply presented the final report, walked through the outcomes, and let the numbers do the talking. There was no dramatic confrontation. There was no shouting, no tears. Just the quiet, undeniable truth. I was indispensable. My work, my presence, my competence, undeniable and respected. Marianne's smirk had vanished completely. That evening, as I returned to my office, I finally allowed myself a moment to breathe. I looked out over the city, the skyline stretching endlessly, and I felt a deep, almost peaceful satisfaction. This was justice, sweet, calm, inevitable justice. I had not needed to humiliate anyone. I had not needed to scream or cry or make anyone suffer. I had simply grown, learned, and let the world catch up to me. The people who once doubted me had been given a lesson. Not in anger, but in respect, in recognition, in the quiet authority of someone who knows her worth. And as I sat there, in the office that had once felt like a cage, I understood something profound. True revenge is not measured by others' suffering, but by your own growth, your own rise, and the calm satisfaction of knowing you are exactly where you were always meant to be. I had been invisible once. I had been underestimated, dismissed, humiliated. But I had endured. I had learned. I had returned. And now I was seen, truly, completely seen.